Hi, my name is Inshalati. Welcome to also the book club. So today I want to talk about three books that I think have really, really interesting plot lines. They are what I would consider very, very strange plot lines because they delve into like the supernatural, they delve into the mystical, the science fiction-y, and there are things that I know in my reality I don't think we will ever get to experience. But it was really, really interesting to get into those books and like go through them with the characters and experience what they could experience despite the fact that I can't experience the same things. So it's going to be three gorgeous books and I hope you have fun. The first book we're going to be talking about is called Before We Say Goodbye by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. It is about a cafe in Tokyo where people are given the ability to go back into the past and speak to people that have previously visited the cafe and clear whatever they need to clear up with those particular people. There are a few rules that come with this time travel aspect of this book, which are a little bit strict in my opinion, but they make for a good plot device. So the first rule is that you can only travel to the past using one chair in the cafe. It's often occupied by a ghost, and unless she gets up from that chair, you can't sit on it. Next one is the fact that you are offered coffee at the beginning of your trip to the past, and then you are then required to drink all of that coffee before it gets cold. Otherwise, you get trapped in the chair as the ghost. And next thing you need to know, which I think is the most important rule in all of this, is the fact that you can't change anything in the future or quote unquote the present. Right. So even if you go back and tell someone that, hey, you're going to get hit by a car and like pass away, you can't change the fact that that's going to happen. Right. You don't create an alternate reality where whatever you have expressed comes true. Right, or doesn't come true because you've given over the information. No, it's just mainly to like give you some comfort in your heart and change your mindset about like things you wish you could have said to your loved ones, to your friends, and in one instant to like your dog. Yes, someone goes back to go speak to their dog. Another rule is the fact that you can't visit people who haven't been to the cafe. And this is simply because one of the other rules is that you can't move around after sitting in the chair that you've been sitting in, which means that you can't go outside to speak to people in the past. No, you have to speak to people that are coming to the cafe or have visited the cafe, so you go back in a time where they were coming to the cafe or are already in the cafe, right? And lastly, you can only be served coffee by a waitress named Kazu. And I don't know, I think she has like magical abilities. But the way this book is framed and the reason why I totally enjoyed it was because this book doesn't feel mystical in any way. It just tells you there's just like this weird phenomenon that is allowed to happen in this one cafe, and that's that. There's really very little mystical stuff except the fact that there's a ghost and Kazu is the one who can get you back into the past. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. The issue with the book, right, was the fact that it was a little bit repetitive. I think Before We Say Goodbye is the fourth installment of the series. And by the time you get to the fourth one, you've had 16 people go back to the past. I think in one instance, they do go to the future, if I'm not mistaken. But that's like in one occurrence. It's a really, really great book. I'm not going to lie. Like, it's a really, really great series. It does something that I don't think other books do the same, but it's repetitive. All you're doing is people come to the cafe, people want to learn about the cafe, and then people go back to the past, speak to whoever they need to speak to, and it changes nothing. And then we do that over and over again for multiple books. It's not a bad thing, but like, it gets a bit repetitive. So maybe read the first book. If you really like it, maybe read the second book. But past that, I personally feel like it was quite repetitive, and you get the gist of what the book is trying to do. It's like, imagine reading a romance novel where they went through the same arcs over and over again throughout like a 10-book series. You'd get very, very tired of that. So I think that's the only downside of it, but the plot was really, really interesting to me. The next book we're going to be talking about is Recursion by Blake Crouch. I know that Blake Crouch is more known for his book Dark Matter, which was then adapted to a show on Apple TV. It's amazing. It's an amazing show. I'll probably talk about the book and the show's adaptation at some point on this channel, but for now we want to talk about Recursion. So Recursion is a little bit complicated in that it deals with multiple realities, and the story basically infers that we are living in a universe where the timeline that we're living on can be manipulated. So the story is about a neuroscientist who creates a machine, and this machine allows you to be able to go back into the past, right? Now, unlike in the first book that I talked about, this machine is being used for nefarious reasons. So this machine, when we first encounter it, we are using it for a detective who's trying to find out what's happening to people. Why are people experiencing certain syndromes like the false memory syndrome? He's trying to figure out why are people going through this thing, because apparently it's only affecting people in the same social group. And when I say social group, I mean if me and my mom know each other and everybody who know me and my mom, those are the people who are going to get affected by this particular syndrome. So this detective is trying to figure it out, and once he gets very, very close to like cracking the case, he is then kidnapped and put into the machine. The person who's operating the machine asks him to recount the day that his daughter got hit by a car. So he goes through the motions, he explains it. The guy operating the machine says, explain to me how it felt, how this, how that, how this, how that, so that I can recreate that day for you so that you can go back into the past and change the past, right? We all know time travel rules. You're not allowed to change the past. But in this instance, they tell you, change the past, right? Get back your daughter. Make sure she doesn't die in that car accident. So we go and we follow this man. He's able to go all the way back to the past just before his daughter walks out the door and gets hit by a car. What he then does is run out the house and go and stop the whole tragedy, and she survives. You are then instructed to just live your life as if it's the first time you've ever lived it, but with the knowledge of how the world actually worked with your daughter still living with you. I thought that was like insane. And then we realized that the day he went back into the past actually has to come around. Because in the present timeline, it was the present day. Now, in the new timeline, it is the future. This man eventually gets to that date, and for some reason, everybody in his social circle now remembers his daughter having died, but she didn't, not in this timeline. So that story was just like insane. Problem with this story is the execution of it. This is a great story. Like what I've told you is a really, really great story. It's impactful. The execution was done really, really well. The issue with this story is that this is probably the first chapter. Not even the first chapter, the first part of the book. So there are like 4 big parts in the story, and you realize, oh my goodness, then what are we doing for the next 75% of this book? That's when the story fall apart, because this story, the part that I just told you, summarizes what actually can happen, but now they need to take you through different parts of the story where they're explaining to you how this machine came about, how this machine began being used as a bad people machine. And I think that was the crazy part. That was the crazy part. Then we start realizing the government interfere. Like, there was too much happening in the book. If we fleshed out the part that I just explained to you, if we just fleshed that out a lot further, we could have had a solid 100-page book. But the problem with this book is that the mechanics of this particular machine tends to break down once you're trying to over-explain everything and how it works, especially to like a person like me who's not like really, really interested in that sci-fi stuff. I just want some surface level sci-fi book. But this book actually does this weird thing where it tries to over-explain like the implications of such a machine. And it's like, it's not your job. It's not your job. It's not your job to come and tell me that if I go back to the past, I create an alternate reality where the initial timeline does not cease to exist. No, it's only waiting for you to converge with it at the point where it converges. And then people around you, your social group, is going to start remembering things that they didn't actually experience in this timeline just because of certain people's actions of taking someone to the past, which creates it's too complicated. It's unnecessarily complicated. They even push in some romance and it's like, what are we doing? What are we doing? We don't need this. We don't need this. And because there's so much, you don't have enough time to flesh out anything. Your characters don't have any character development. You are not convinced why people are in love. In this environment, come on, let's be serious. And so I think that was like my main gripes with the story. The first part is very intriguing, but the last 75% were a drag. I still think that Blake Crouch does a superb job with Dark Matter, which then gets adapted to one of my favorite shows of all time because of one person playing two characters. That thing is... But that's not what we're talking about. What he does in this book is try to over-explain a mind-boggling version of reality that I don't think we really, really needed. I enjoyed the first part, but the rest, no. But it was a really interesting plot, and that's what we're here to talk about. The interesting part of this book was the idea of it, right? The concept of it, and not necessarily the execution of it. Okay, so the last book on our list is going to be The Schrödinger Girl. The Schrödinger Girl is a little bit interesting in that it requires you to understand a little bit of science, just a little bit. So the science theory it is extracted from loosely, very, very loosely, is the Schrödinger cat theory. The Schrödinger cat theory is basically the theory that purports that if you take a cat, you put it in a box with a radioactive atom, which is poisonous, and the atom breaks. In the sealed box, the cat is both dead and alive. The reason that it can be both is because you as an individual, as a human being, cannot say it is dead or it is alive in the box because you haven't seen it. So that is called superposition. That idea that it exists in both states is superposition, if I remember correctly. So what this book then is about this scientist who comes across this girl in a cafe, right? He meets this girl, he interacts with her, he likes her, he thinks she's really, really fascinating. And she just so happens to be a student in the university that he is teaching at. Fine. The next time he meets this girl, she's in a different setting than the first time they met, obviously, because the first time they met in a cafe, and I think the second time they meet, he meets her as a model in someone's class. And he's like, hey, I thought you wanted to do something else. And she was like, what do you mean? The last time I saw you at the cafe, I said this is what I wanted to do, right? And the professor goes, well, that's interesting because from what he remembers from the conversation, it seemed like she was thinking of doing the modeling and she was thinking of doing something else, but she was adamant about becoming a specific thing. Let's say, for instance, it's becoming a activist during the 1960s, because I think the book is based in the 1960s. So he's in his mind, he's really confused as to how she went all the way from being adamant about being an activist in the 1960s to becoming a model in someone's class. It didn't fit with the girl who he first met. Then he goes about his life, and a few weeks later he meets the activist, and he's like, what's going on here? So just to cut the story short, this man is living in a world where 4 versions of this girl actually exists. The version of her that is the activist, and the version of her which is a model, and there's another version of her. I think there's 4 versions of her, if I can remember correctly. And he's trying to figure out why exactly is this girl existing in this one reality of his, in his one timeline, but as 4 different versions of himself. It's not the doppelganger effect where people look the same. No, it's exactly the same girl, same name, but for some reason she has 4 different realities. Those realities never converge, but they converge in his timeline. He's wondering if other people can see her too, but he's met her in other spaces where there were other people. So he's not sure if other people can see her too. So he starts to go insane to the point where this man starts to do the right, because this is mad. Is he really seeing this? Is this a scientific phenomenon? Is this just like madness? It was a very interesting book, right? Because once you read this book and realize what's actually happening, I think you realize very, very quickly in the book what's actually happening. But once you realize what's happening, you're trying to figure it out with him too, whether or not this girl actually exists in all 4 versions of herself. The cat theory purports that the cat is both dead and alive. She's both existing in all 4 of these realities, despite the fact that she's not caged in some sort of a box. But here she is existing and he can see her, but he goes insane because he's like, surely this is not how the real world actually works. It's different. Like, I don't think I'd read any book, especially at that point, where you hear about these different realities of one person existing all in one timeline. Like, you hear about people, like in the last book I just mentioned, remembering things from different timelines that they'd never experienced before, like grief and loss that they'd never experienced before. But in this one, this girl is living her many lives, but it's one girl. Even to this day, I think about this book, and I think I read this book in 2022 in December. I remember because I was writing an exam at that time and I was like, I don't want something that's going to break my head while I'm writing one of the biggest papers of my life. And it did. It broke my head because by the time I was done with that book, I was like, what just happened here? Then I got into this whole rabbit hole about the Schrödinger cat theory, the thought experiment that went behind it, understanding like what exactly was this trying to explain. Then you realize that that particular theory or thought experiment is trying to explain, or rather challenge, the fact that things can't be both dead and alive. Things can't be both opposite and exist in both states. Like normal things, normal day-to-day objects can't be that. However, other things in science can be that. I'm not the best person to explain this, but I think when I read the book, I was like, man, this is like screwing with my head. But I think I really, really needed the reprieve at that time. And I was like, yes. So I think this was one of my favorite books that had a really, really strange plot, because it wasn't your standard multiverse. It wasn't your standard time travel. It wasn't your standard, there are ghosts in the story. No. It was just a simple, this is what he sees. This is what we're experiencing with him, with these girls. But is it really true? And I think the execution of this particular book was done surprisingly well, given the subject matter. It's very difficult to explain a book from a scientific thought experiment. Like, not even something that's already been proven, but like from just like someone's thoughts. And I think they did it really, really well, because now you're sitting there going, is she a doppelganger? Is she dead? Is this man on like what's going on? Anyway, thanks guys for joining me. As always, don't forget to subscribe, to like the video, and to put down your comments on any of the books that I've talked about. Let me know whether it's something you would be interested in reading. Let me know also if you've ever come across any books where you were just like, what is going on here? But I love it. Oh, I hated it. Let me know. I'd be interested in reading any of your recommendations if you have any of those. I'm always in the hunt for like really strange books, because I'm like in between genres right now. No, I'm not. I have a genre, but like, just let me know. Anyway, bye guys.